In today's video, we're going to be turning this image from daytime to nighttime. Let's hop into Photoshop. Duplicate your first layer and turn off the bottom layer. Double click to open up your layer styles and then go to the blend options. Set it to the blue channel and adjust the slider to the left to make sure we remove the blue sky. Just tweak it until you find the right amount. Hit OK, check if you've done a good job. Go back and clean it up. Once you're satisfied with that, go back to your first layer, duplicate it, and turn off the bottom layer. So what we want to do now is isolate the sky from the water using a layer mask. So on our second layer, we're going to add a layer mask. Select your brush tool and choose the appropriate brush size. I think a soft round brush would do. Decrease the size. Then make sure it's set to black to hide. So we're just hiding those pixels there in the sky. Then zoom in to clean up. You can click X to change from black to white. White is reveal, black is to hide. Once we're happy with that, we're gonna drag in our night sky image. Make sure it's in between the first and the second layer, and then just position it and scale it up according to how you want it to look. Now you want to mask it away from the water. So you want to add a layer mask. Select your brush tool, set it to black. I'm going to brush the sky away from the water. Just make sure it's nicely cleaned. Now we're going to add a hue and saturation layer. I want to set the channel to yellow and decrease the saturation. Not all the way, just so it's a little bit gray, but do not remove all the green. We're going to add another hue and saturation layer. This time we want to set it to colorize. I want to set the hue to a bluish color. Adjust the saturation a bit. Add a curves adjustment layer. So we want to decrease the highlights and decrease the shadows. And then on the layer mask, we want to invert it and brush in the tree line there to make sure the embankment is nice and dark, because at night it wouldn't be that bright. Do the same for the water because I feel like it's a bit too bright. Just clean up around the bench, decrease the brush size to make sure you get in between the bench frame. Now we're going to select a color lookup adjustment layer. And under LUTs, we're going to select the Moonlight 3DL. Now we're just going to clean up the water there. You see our mask was not accurate. So go to the second layer, first layer, just brush that away. Change your brush size and clean it up nicely. Now we're going to add a curves adjustment layer, and we're going to bump up the highlights and a little bit of the shadows. I think that's okay. Now we're going to add a levels adjustment layer. I'm going to increase the highlights to make it a little bit brighter. Adjust the midtones, the highlights. That looks good. Just gonna adjust the sky there, make it a little bit bigger. And give it a slight rotation. Now I want some of those stars to be reflected on the water below. So when I look for a sky image, duplicate it. And the transform tool, when I right click and perspective warp. And just warp the perspective. Then with the layer mask, we're gonna brush away the excess. Once that's good, we're gonna decrease the opacity to something like, I think 44 is good, and then change the blending mode to something like overlay and adjust the opacity. Now we add a levels adjustment layer above the water layer. Adjust the highlights and the midtones. And we're gonna invert the mask. Use the brush tool, and we're just gonna brighten up the sky a little bit. Use a soft brown brush. Make sure it's set to white because we're revealing. Now we're gonna brush in the highlights there. Also around the tree line to give it a slight halo effect. need to bump the highlights on the bench too. So I want to duplicate that layer and delete the layer mask and add a new layer mask. Invert the layer mask, and then we're gonna brush in the highlights. Now adjust the opacity so that it's not too bright. Just find that sweet spot. I want to add a little bit of highlights into the water. So with the soft brown brush, I'm just going to brush in some of the highlights in there. Decrease the flow. And then I'm just going to lightly brush in there a few strokes, just to give it a little bit of depth. Go back to the second hue adjustment layer and adjust the saturation. And also adjust the hue. I'll go back to the first hue and saturation layer and go back to the yellow channel and decrease the saturation and just tweak it until it looks good. And there's your final image. Nighttime and daytime. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment down below if you have any video suggestions. See you next time.